My sister faked infertility and tried to trick me into being her surrogate. My family sided with her when I exposed the truth. When my sister begged for my help, I had no idea it would lead to the biggest betrayal of my life. I thought I was doing something selfless, something noble. But little did I know, it would unravel into a web of lies so deep, it would shatter my trust in her and in my own family. What makes it worse? My family didn't just take her side. They turned their backs on me completely. The people I grew up with, the ones who were supposed to love me unconditionally, saw me as the villain. All because I dared to uncover the truth. This story isn't just about a broken relationship with my sister. It's about deception, manipulation, and the lengths some people will go to in order to get what they want. It's about the heartbreak of realizing that sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you'll understand why I had no choice but to stand up for myself, even if it meant losing everything I thought I knew about family. Growing up, my sister and I always had a complicated relationship. On the surface, we seemed close. Two sisters who shared secrets, played together, and supported each other. But beneath that, there was always this quiet competition. She had a knack for being the center of attention, and somehow I was always in her shadow. Whether it was in school, with friends, or even at family gatherings, she was the golden child, and I was, well, just there. My parents adored her, though they'd never admit it outright. They'd brush off her mistakes, celebrate her every little achievement, and subtly compare us, leaving me feeling like I was always coming up short. As we got older, things didn't change much. She was still the star of the family, but I had learned to live with it. I focused on my own life and tried not to let the favoritism bother me too much. That is, until everything started spiraling out of control with her so-called infertility struggles. It began with a tearful phone call. She told me how much she wanted to be a mom but couldn't conceive. She painted this heart-wrenching picture of herself as a woman desperate to build a family, but stuck in a hopeless situation. At first I felt nothing but sympathy. I mean, who wouldn't? Her voice cracked as she talked about failed treatments and sleepless nights spent crying. I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? She's my sister. But then, she asked me for something I wasn't prepared for. She wanted me to be her surrogate. I remember her saying it like it was the most natural thing in the world, as if it wasn't a huge sacrifice she was asking of me. She told me how much it would mean to her, how I was the only one she could trust. For a moment, I was caught off guard. The idea seemed surreal, almost flattering. She made it sound like I'd be giving her the greatest gift anyone could ever give. I won't lie. There was a tiny part of me that wanted to say yes, just to see her happy. But before I even had time to process it, my family got involved. Suddenly, it wasn't just her asking. It was everyone. My parents were relentless. They told me how selfless I'd be, how I'd be saving her life in a way. They guilted me with stories of how much she'd suffered, how much she deserved to be a mother. Every conversation turned into a lecture about doing the right thing for family. The pressure was overwhelming. It felt like the weight of the entire family's happiness was suddenly on my shoulders. I wanted to help her. I really did. But something deep inside me kept nagging at me, telling me to pause, to think it through. And thank goodness I did. Because the truth would change everything. When my sister first asked me to be her surrogate, I wanted to believe it was something I could do for her. I really did. But as the days passed, doubt started creeping in. This wasn't just a small favor, it was huge. Being a surrogate would mean months of physical and emotional strain. It wasn't just about carrying a baby. It would affect my body, my life, my career. And what about the risks? What if something went wrong? I had so many questions, but every time I tried to voice them, it felt like no one wanted to listen. I started wondering why my sister wasn't looking into other options. There are so many treatments available these days, not to mention adoption. But every time I brought it up, she had an excuse. IVF was too expensive. Adoption took too long. It felt strange, but I kept brushing it off. After all, she was my sister. Why would she lie about something so serious? The pressure from my family was what really made things unbearable. They didn't just ask me to consider surrogacy, they demanded it. It was like they all had the same script. My mom would say things like, "You're her only hope," or "This is what family does for each other." My dad? He kept reminding me of every time my sister had supposedly helped me in the past, as if I owed her this. But the worst was when they called me selfish. That word stung more than anything else. My mom said, "You'll regret this one day when you realize how much she needed you." My dad chimed in, "If you don't help her, you'll be tearing this family apart." They didn't see it as a request. They saw it as my responsibility. No matter how much I tried to explain my hesitations, they made me feel like I was failing my family. Eventually, to get everyone off my back, I agreed to go to a consultation with a doctor. I figured it couldn't hurt to at least get some professional advice and understand what surrogacy would involve. Maybe then, I could make an informed decision. But that's where things took a strange turn. During the appointment, the doctor asked my sister some routine questions about her medical history. I noticed she was avoiding eye contact and stumbling over her words. When the doctor asked about her previous treatments, she hesitated before giving vague answers. It didn't sit right with me. I started paying closer attention, and that's when I realized something was off. She couldn't even provide basic details about her supposed infertility struggles. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. The inconsistencies, the excuses, the over-the-top desperation, it all started to add up. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if my sister might not be telling the whole truth. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed proof. It all unraveled one evening when I accidentally overheard my sister on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally. I had gone over to her house to drop off something, and as I was about to knock on the door, I heard her voice through the slightly open window. She was laughing, talking to someone, and her words stopped me cold. Honestly, I can't believe how easy it's been to convince them all. It's not like I want to deal with 9 months of cravings, weight gain, and being stuck in bed. Why should I when I can just have her do it for me? I froze. My mind raced, trying to process what I'd just heard. Did she mean me? Was she really saying she wasn't infertile, that this whole thing was just some elaborate way to avoid the inconvenience of pregnancy? I wanted to believe I'd misheard. But her next words sealed it. Once this works, everything will be perfect. Mom and Dad are already on my side, so she'll cave. She always does. My heart sank. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't about desperation or heartbreak. My sister had been lying, manipulating not just me but our entire family. And all for what? To make her life easier while I carried the burden. I didn't confront her right then. I needed more than just overheard words. Over the next few days, I started digging. I found discrepancies in her supposed medical records she'd shown me. Treatments she claimed to have undergone didn't match the dates. Bills for procedures she insisted were real simply didn't exist. I even spoke to her doctor, who confirmed she had no record of being treated for infertility. It was all a lie. When I finally confronted her, I didn't hold back. I laid everything out, the phone call, the fake records, the blatant manipulation. I expected her to break down, maybe admit she'd made a mistake. But instead, she exploded. She accused me of snooping, of invading her privacy. She called me jealous, bitter, and even cruel for trying to ruin her happiness. She didn't deny it, she just deflected, twisting the narrative to make me look like the bad guy. And then came the family. I thought they'd see the truth, that they'd finally understand the impossible position I'd been put in. But no. Instead, they sided with her. My parents dismissed the evidence, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. My mom told me, "She's your sister. You should be helping her, not tearing her down." My dad said I was being dramatic and selfish, that I was jealous of the attention she was getting. It was like being gaslit by everyone I'd ever trusted. They ignored the facts and accused me of being unsupportive, of not caring about family. I couldn't believe it. I'd uncovered the truth, exposed the lies, and yet somehow I was the villain in their eyes. It was the most isolating, heartbreaking moment of my life. After the confrontation, I knew I couldn't keep playing along. The lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my feelings, it was too much. I had to make a choice, and for the first time I chose myself. I told my sister and my family, very clearly, that I would not be her surrogate. No excuses, no compromises, just a firm no. And then I walked away. It wasn't easy. My heart was pounding, and part of me wanted to turn back, to try to explain again, to make them understand. But I knew that no amount of explaining would matter. They'd already made up their minds about who the villain was in this story. The days that followed were some of the loneliest I've ever experienced. My phone didn't stop ringing. My mom called constantly, leaving messages that ranged from guilt trips to outright accusations. "How could you do this to your sister?" she said in one voicemail. "You're tearing this family apart." My dad was just as bad, saying I was being immature, that I needed to apologize and make things right. It was like they didn't even care about the lies she'd told. They were more upset about the fact that I wasn't playing along with her scheme. And my sister? She didn't waste any time trying to twist the narrative even further. She told everyone who would listen that I was the selfish one, that I was jealous of her, and didn't want to see her happy. She even made up stories about how I'd betrayed her in the past, pulling out every trick she could to paint herself as the victim. Watching her manipulate people so easily was infuriating, but what hurt the most was how willing everyone was to believe her. The fallout was devastating. My parents practically stopped talking to me, unless it was to criticize me or demand that I apologize to my sister. Family gatherings became unbearable. Every conversation felt like a passive-aggressive attack, a reminder that I was the one who had broken the family. Eventually, I stopped going altogether. It just wasn't worth the emotional toll. But as hard as it was to lose that connection with my family, I don't regret my decision. Walking away wasn't just about standing up to my sister. It was about standing up for myself. For so long, I'd let my family's expectations dictate my actions, always putting their needs ahead of my own. Saying no to my sister was the first time I truly put myself first, and that moment of clarity gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I won't lie, there are still days when I feel the weight of what happened. Losing the support of your family is no small thing, even when you know you're in the right. But in the end, I realized that their love came with conditions, and that's not the kind of love I want in my life. I've started focusing on building relationships with people who value honesty and respect, people who see me for who I really am. It's not an easy road, but it's one I'm proud to walk. Looking back on everything, I've learned some powerful lessons. The biggest one? Always trust your instincts. From the beginning, something about my sister's story didn't sit right with me, but I let guilt and pressure cloud my judgment. I doubted myself because I wanted to believe the best in my family. But deep down, I knew something wasn't adding up. If I had ignored that little voice in my head, I would have ended up trapped in a situation that wasn't right for me. Standing up for myself wasn't easy, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Walking away from people you've loved your whole life, people you thought would always have your back, is one of the hardest things anyone can do. The betrayal, the isolation, it cuts deep. But at the same time, there's an empowerment that comes from saying, enough is enough. I realize that my worth isn't tied to how much I sacrifice for others, especially when they don't respect my boundaries. Sure, it's painful to know my family sided with my sister despite everything. But I've found peace in knowing I did what was right for me. I chose to break away from the toxicity, to stand up for my own happiness, even if it meant standing alone. That decision has made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think about my story? Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for yourself meant going against the people you care about? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done?